Welcome everyone to our first travel talk of 2025. Um, we're so excited to see many of you again from years past, and we're thrilled to see many new names and new people joining us as well. Avid travelers all. So, as I was just saying, we host travel talks to share important intel that travelers need to know so that your travels can be as smart and pleasant and rewarding as possible. Um, and let me just start out also by thanking our sponsor. Um, MedJet is our sponsor of our Wow Wednesdays travel series. They're a travel emergency assistance membership. If you should end up hospitalized far from home, MedJet will get you back home to the doctor you trust and the hospital near your family, saving you potentially many tens of thousands of dollars. And MedJet offers crisis protection too. So if you're far from home and you feel your safety and security may be threatened because of a political threat, a terrorist attack, a natural disaster, they'll come to the rescue. I've had a membership myself ever since my kids were babies. And MedJet is making this hour with you possible. So thank you to our sponsor, MedJet. And now let's get started. I think most of you are here. I hope most of you are here. And I want to introduce the team here, these wonderful panelists who are sharing the screen with me. First of all, let me introduce Brooke Wilkinson, our executive editor. I know a lot of you know Brooke because she's answering the many travel questions you email into us. Brooke is in Northern California. She's traveled to more than 50 countries, everything from backpacking solo through China to elaborate wow list, the most amazing trips. And as Brooke reminded me this morning, I gave her her first job back when I was at Condé Nast Traveler magazine more than 2 decades ago. I hired Brooke and we've been together ever since. So Brooke, take it away.
Yes, thanks, Wendy, for that first job 25 years ago, and then here's to another 25. Hi, everyone. Great to have you all here. As Wendy said, I know many of you. I recognize many names among our attendees tonight. But if you're new to WendyPerrin.com, welcome. We are a website that helps travelers plan trips in a couple different ways. First of all, we're journalists. We write articles about travel, many of which we'll reference tonight and throw links in the Q&A box. But we're also kind of travel matchmakers, I like to say. We connect travelers with experts who plan private, custom-tailored trips. Many of those planners are on our WOW list of trusted travel experts, which you'll find in the menu bar on our website. And when you contact those experts via our site, we guide you through our unique WOW approach to travel planning, which is designed to avoid those common pitfalls and get you the best trip possible. Plus, we also offer a personalized trip recommendations through our Ask Wendy questionnaire, which is how I email with many of you all the time. And you can also find that in the black menu bar on the website. Back to you, Wendy.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. And now I want to introduce Nicole Bernier, coming to you from Boston. Nicole and I also worked together at Condé Nast Traveler, and I'm so excited that she has joined us here at WendyPerrin.com. As I said, Nicole's in the Boston area. She's got a big family. She loves traveling with them, but also on her bike. That's the speed she likes to go. It covers more ground than walking, but it's not as fast as a train. So Nicole, please say hello to everybody.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here and see you all. I have been with WendyPerrin.com for about 6 months now, and I have a range of roles with the website, including tracking new nonstop flights, helping to write the newsletters and the articles, and compiling the reviews from our travelers after their trips. What I'd like to start by doing is mention a few housekeeping details for tonight. First, I'd like to ask you to make sure to open up the Q&A box in Zoom. That's where you can type in your questions, and we will try to answer as many of them as possible. If we do not get to your question tonight, you can email it to us at questions@WendyPerrin.com. Please also watch for that Q&A box tonight for useful links to be posted throughout the evening, and links to articles and other resources, which our team members, Flory and Christine, will be dropping in throughout the hour.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nicole. And now I would like to introduce our favorite traveling grandmother joining us from upstate New York. It's Susan Crandall. Susan was the former executive editor of Travel and Leisure. She's a lifelong traveler, a writer, an editor. She's even a pilot. She wrote a book about people reinventing themselves. Um, she happens to be Brooke's mom and has been on many trips with Brooke and writes amazing articles about these experiences. And she has turned into quite the road tester of the trip planners on the wow list. So, Susan, please say hello to everybody.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I hope there's some other grandparents out there. It's a wonderful time of life to hit the road and see places. And in fact, my favorite traveling companions are my daughter, my son-in-law, and our 13-year-old grandson. So it's really fun. And when I was at Travel and Leisure some decades ago, my kind of guilty secret was that I really didn't enjoy travel planning. I loved the trips. I loved the sense of discovery. I loved everything about being on the road. But I found planning travel was very stressful, that I would leave something out, disappoint our readers, whatever. And since I've been using really good travel planners, the stress has evaporated. So I'm very grateful and happy to be here.
Well, we could all use less stress for sure. So those are inspirational words. So I wanted to start out by giving everybody kind of a big picture view of the global travel landscape this year. So as many of you know, first the pandemic changed travel patterns greatly, and then the over tourism that it led to, during the pandemic, very few people were traveling. Then after that, everybody was traveling. And a lot of places around the world became very crowded. And that's kind of where we are now. Last year was a record-breaking year for international travel. The number of travelers surpassed pre-pandemic levels. And this year, travel companies are expecting the number of trips to increase another 24%. And so this problem of over tourism is expected to get worse. And I'm sure you all are aware, some cities have been putting, when they're overrun in peak season, there have even been some protests. Some of the cities are putting in place bans and restrictions, limiting the number of travelers, like limiting the number of cruise ships allowed. Say in this year, ports that will be limiting the number of cruise ships are Ibiza, Spain, as well as Juneau, Alaska. Some places are limiting the building of new hotels, such as Amsterdam or Bruges in Belgium. Some places are limiting short-term rentals in France, in Greece. Some countries are levying tourist taxes, New Zealand, more and more taxes on travel fees, entry fees, daily fees. Santorini and Mykonos in Greece, islands, they're introducing new cruise taxes on cruise passengers. Venice, of course, started a daily fee for visitors last year. They're increasing it this year. So this is just a sort of the big picture in travel right now. A lot of the places that are over tourism hotspots are in Europe, and they are hubs for those cruise ships, or they otherwise get a ton of cruise passengers, like Barcelona, Amsterdam, which is a hub for river cruises, Venice, Dubrovnik, Croatia. It's really not going to stop anytime soon that we can foresee, especially not this year, because right now there's a parity between the US dollar and the euro. The dollar is very strong against the euro. So a lot of people want to take advantage of that. So, the million-dollar question is, what can savvy travelers do to avoid these tourist masses, crowds, lines, and the truth is this, the truth is that it's actually possible to go in the peak of peak season and have totally private experiences, totally avoid all the crowds, if you're willing to pay for that. Like if you want to go to Italy in June, which is a peak time, and you want all of the lines and the waits to disappear, and you want to maximize your experience in every way and see every site at the optimal moment, you can do that if you use the right local fixer. It's just really a matter of, of affordability. And now, if you do want the kind of fixer who can do that for you, of course, write to questions@WendyPerrin.com and we can connect you with the right person for your specific needs. But for the rest of us mere mortals, here is how we can, we can try to avoid the impact of over tourism. So first of all, go in off season and realize that what is low season or shoulder season has changed in the past few years. That's what I meant by the pandemic and over tourism. They've changed travel patterns. So May and September, they used to be shoulder season. They are now peak season. November and March used to be lower season. Now they're shoulder season. A lot of people are going to Europe in November and March. And in fact, those can be excellent times to experience Mediterranean countries in particular. Really, the only low season right now in places like Europe where the climate is similar to here is January and February. I myself now travel on the fringes of shoulder season. That's how I do it. In fact, at the end of this month, I'll be in the south of Spain. First week of March, I'll be in Portugal. Last October, toward the end of October, I did a whole swing through the Mediterranean, and it was still beach weather. People were swimming. Tim went scuba diving. So it really, the shoulder season is working out for a lot of people. In the most popular countries, choose under the radar places. So take Italy, for instance, which is the most popular country this year. Of all of the trips that people have already booked the WOW way, Italy is number one. And it's also the Jubilee year. It's the Vatican's Jubilee year, which is going to bring an estimated 35 million people to Rome this year. But you don't need to go to Rome. I mean, it would be great to go to Rome someday, but the point is there are so many off the beaten path parts of countries. In Italy, you've got amazing places where you'll find very few tourists if you do it right. Emilia-Romagna, Umbria, the Piedmont, Basilicata, Calabria. There are many, many, many places. And, you don't have to go to Lake Como. You could go to Lake Orta or Lake Garda. Or if you want to go to Lake Como, you can do it in shoulder season. So there are many options in those popular countries. Even in the popular cities, I also have to say, like, as I said, I was in Venice last October. I was in Dubrovnik, Croatia last October. And I really found that as long as yes, the main boulevard, like the main strip through town, the road, the streets that everybody's taking to get from the Piazza San Marco. Yes, those are very crowded, but if you just stay in a hotel in a more residential area, and if you walk 2 minutes away from those crowded pathways, you'll actually be like alone in the street. And so I hope that Christine or Flory, who are in the background here helping us out, I hope that they've put the list of most booked countries in the Q&A chat for you all to take a look at. And now let me hand the conversation over to Brooke, who's going to give us some many more details.
Yeah, thanks, Wendy. So I'm going to focus on a couple specific regions, the trends that we're seeing in South America and Asia. They're both of which are regions that are near and dear to my heart, places I've visited many, many times over the last 30 years. So first looking at South America, Colombia is a place that's finally coming into its own. I'm so delighted to see this. For a long time, it's really been a sleeper of an all-around fabulous destination. It's got incredible biodiversity, welcoming people, great food, coffee, of course, sophisticated cities, and it's all very close to the US. It's a 3-hour flight from Miami, 5 hours from New York. And now, as of this fall, there are new nonstop flights from Chicago and Houston. Many travelers expect that it's going to be a beach destination because it has both Caribbean coastline and Pacific coastline, but it actually hasn't had those beaches aren't all that accessible to US travelers in the past. But something I've noticed is that there are new hotels and resorts opening in the Rosario Islands, which are off the Caribbean coast of Colombia. When I was there, I hired a boat from Cartagena to take us out, my family out to the islands, and we had a gorgeous day on this beautiful, Caribbean water, crystal blue water. But now you can overnight on the islands really comfortably. So that's a nice trend there that's happening there. Chile is going to be very popular this year. It's on the list that I think is in our Q&A box of our top most booked destinations for the coming year. And so if you're thinking about that part of South America, I'd encourage you to think about Argentina maybe instead. I was just in Buenos Aires for the 5th time, I think, last November. And every time I discover something new. This time it was a massive ecological reserve that was walking distance from my urban high-rise hotel. So there's a lot of fun finds in Buenos Aires and beyond. I'm hearing a lot about Bariloche, which is kind of an alpine style, feels almost European in architecture, town on a beautiful lake in northern Patagonia. So I'd love to get there. I've been to the southern, better known parts of Patagonia, but Bariloche is a spot to put on your map. And there's also a new flight I want to mention from New York, to Buenos Aires. So a bit easier to get there. Nearby, close on my own list, is Uruguay, which has been getting a lot of buzz, been a destination for South American travelers in the region, and now more and more Americans are discovering it. Another trend I'm seeing in South America, similar to what Wendy mentioned, is better management of tourism by local governments. It's a trend that we really need to see more of all over the world to preserve the places that we all love so much. The Galapagos recently doubled their entry fee per person from $100 per person to $200 per person. And Machu Picchu has a new ticketing system that limits the number of visitors at a time. And I found it to be really successful in dispersing people around the Incan ruins when I was there last year. Shifting over to Asia, Japan has been the story since COVID lockdowns ended, and Japan was actually one of the last countries to reopen its borders to foreigners. And so it's been excruciatingly popular ever since then, and quite expensive as a result. And I just learned that Korea has the very same species of cherry blossom trees as Japan. They actually brought them over to Korea, cuttings from those very same trees. So a lot of people, one of the reasons people go to Japan is to see the cherry blossoms bloom in the spring. And it turns out you can see the very same trees blooming in Korea without the crowds. Thailand's another place in Asia that's been extremely hot, for years now, but it's going to get even more so because it's the backdrop for the latest season of The White Lotus, which I bet a lot of you are addicted to as I am. It's a great travel drama, kind of soapy drama. And that 3rd season is coming out later this month, and it's set at the Four Seasons Koh Samui. So if you're looking at that part of the world, consider Laos, I would say. It's a bit like Thailand 50 years ago, but with its own, of course, very distinct culture and landscapes. It's truly been my favorite travel surprise of the last decade. And it's easier to get around the country now. I tried out a new high-speed train that was built through most of the country, and more is getting built over the coming months. And it made it a lot easier to get around. One more bit of news coming from China, which has long required that US travelers get a visa before they enter the country. And China just announced toward the end of last year that they're now allowing US travelers to take a visa-free layover in China up to 10 days. You just have to be going on to a 3rd country. So it can't be a trip just from the US to China and back, but you can do, a full week, 10 days of touring within China, and then move on to, say, Southeast Asia or wherever else you might want to go around the world. And you don't need to go through the whole visa process, which makes things a lot easier. And one worldwide trend that I just want to put on everyone's radar is that we're seeing more and more people are booking their trips farther ahead, which makes availability tight in the most obvious spots. So it's even more important to find those hidden gems. And the best way to do that, I would say, is to ask an expert. You don't necessarily need to uncover them yourself, but if you use our trip questionnaire to contact one of the specialists on the WOW list, don't just come to them with a list of, I want to go to Italy, I want to see Rome, Florence, Venice, or maybe some places that your neighbors just come back from. I would love to, when I'm talking to these people, I ask them, where would they send their best friend on a trip? Where are they just back from a scouting trip, scouting new hotels or dreaming up new experiences? Where are they going on their own vacations? You can get a lot of out of the box ideas that will take you off the beaten path that way to kind of open yourselves up to the possibilities. Nicole, would you like to tell us what trends you're seeing?
Sure. Thanks, Brooke. So one of the things that I keep an eye on here at WendyPerrin.com are the trends in new direct flights, because they are really a barometer of where airlines are expecting to see extra interests. And the new routes and the seats that they're adding this year make it not only easier for you to reach a destination, but they give you a better range of times and fares. So this year, major airlines are adding 35 new routes overseas, which is about 4% up from last year and 10% from the pre-COVID times in 2019. Delta and United both have announced that this will be their biggest year ever for new transatlantic routes. So we've mentioned Italy a few times already tonight. There are 14 new routes being offered there from the US, including Delta's new service from New York to Sicily, which fills a market niche that has a lot of demand, and from Atlanta to Naples, which gives travelers easy access to the Amalfi Coast and Pompeii. United Airlines is adding direct service from Palmero, as well as Bilbao, Spain, and 2 locations in Portugal, Madeira Island and Faro. JetBlue is continuing to branch out overseas from the East Coast, and it's adding new service from Boston to Edinburgh and Madrid. And there's some exciting service to new locations entirely. We've all been reading in the news a bit about this new flight to Greenland coming this winter, in addition to other news we've been reading about Greenland. We recently wrote a feature at WendyPerrin.com about Greenland as the new cold thing. But we examined whether or not it's really right for everyone. There's some things you have to bear in mind. It doesn't have the infrastructure of a lot of the places that people have typically gone. So you can find that article on our homepage with more information about whether or not Greenland is a good spot for you to experience a hot new frontier. Just yesterday, there was an announcement of first ever service to Bari, the capital of Puglia, from New York on the Italian Airlines Neos. And from the national airline of the United Arab Emirates, Etihad Airways, there's going to be a first ever service to Abu Dhabi from Atlanta. And for those of us who remember the Concorde, we're even hearing some supersonic whispers again. Last week was the first successful test run of Boom Technologies' new airline called Overture in California. We haven't had commercial supersonic flights since the Concorde folded 21 years ago. And there are already 130 pre-orders of these aircraft from American Airlines, United Airlines, and Japan Airlines. On the hotel front, we're seeing a wider and wider range of lodging styles than ever before. Among luxury chains, we're actually seeing the return of Starwood Hotels, which had a really beloved rewards program that was especially popular among people who love to stay there. Our travelers seem to be especially fond of small boutique and eclectic sort of one-of-a-kind properties that have a local flavor and that really lend themselves to authentic experiences. And these are the kind of places that our travel experts find for us and kind of sneak out that you're not going to find in every guidebook. We hear raves about places like a dog sledding farm and boutique hotel in northern Norway in the Finnmark region, like Giraffe Manor in Nairobi, which is certainly one of a kind, where giraffes stick their head in and have breakfast with you, and a luxury jungle retreat in Cambodia, where you can actually zip line to your luxury platform tents. I don't know about you, but these are the kind of things that get me really excited. As Wendy mentioned, I have a large family. I have 5 children. And so I'm personally a fan of staying in homes and villas where you can have a little bit more elbow room and space flexibility and kitchen and laundry facilities. But when it comes to things like Airbnb and VRBO, we do keep seeing local ordinances putting restrictions on personal residences as rentals. So other creative options keep popping up that we see, everything from treehouse getaways to glamping and yurts and airstreams. Here in the US, I'm actually a fan of something called auto camps, which are luxury Airstream trailers parked in places like Zion and Joshua Tree and Cape Cod. Personally, I love this. All this range of options means more creative choices for travelers. On to you, Susan. Take it away.
Um, yeah, I guess I'm 73 now, and I don't mean to be morbid about it, but I'm choosing more carefully where I want to go now. And I also feel it's the time of life to splurge a little bit. And splurging can mean the amount of time you have to spend, or it can mean the amount of money you have to spend. But if there's some place that you've always been dying to go, maybe this is the moment for it. And I put this into play just this past year over Thanksgiving when I took my favorite traveling group to Antarctica. Now, and the trip was even more spectacular than I expected. Now, I did see that there was a question about, how can I find a reasonable trip to Antarctica? Well, I would leave that to the other travel experts on the panel. But I will say that I felt our trip was worth every penny, every hour. And so I think that's something to think about. And I think you also need to be realistic about what you're going to do. I was thinking today about the fact that when I was in my 50s, I was invited by my cousins to sleep on the ground for 3 weeks and raft the Grand Canyon with them. And I did it, and it was wonderful. More recently, we planned a trip to California's Channel Islands and decided 2 days on the ground was plenty. So you're thinking about that a little bit more. But I do think it's a time to continue to spread your wings.
Great. Okay, well, so we promised a Q&A, so we're going to try and get to as many questions as possible tonight. We have a lot of great questions. We loved reading all the questions that you all submitted when you signed up for the Zoom. So we're going to get to some of those and the ones that are showing up in the Q&A box. So I'm going to throw these in read off some questions and throw them in the direction of some of our panelists. First off, Wendy, we got a question: are New Zealand and Australia overbooked? How far in advance does one need to book? You were just in New Zealand and Australia.
Yeah, that's right. I was in Australia last year and in New Zealand the year before. I would say probably it's smart to start thinking about it a year ahead. You don't have to. You could still, it depends on when you want to be there and whether it's peak season. If you're trying to go to New Zealand during the Christmas, New Year's holiday, it fills up far ahead. That's what we did. And I remember, uh, booking everything basically in like the April before. Um, so, if you've got flexibility, you can wait until maybe like 3 months ahead. But if you can start the earlier you can start thinking about it, because New Zealand and Australia have both been very, very popular since the pandemic.
Yeah. Nicole, I got a question I'd love for you to start answering. We might all want to jump in. Cedra asked, what countries are under the tourist radar and still reasonably priced? And similarly, where to travel for rich culture that is not mobbed by other tourists? What do you think about that?
Sure. I mean, there are so many ways to answer this question. What I would say, the question really is about where are there places that have so many of the attributes that people love when they travel, the scenery, the culture, cuisine, art, history, architecture, all that, but that are not the household names, that are the same old famous cities and villages and islands that we always hear about. So you look, for example, at some of the countries in Central America. Our team went for a work retreat to Belize a few months ago. And Belize is known for stunning natural beauty and coastline. It's got the second largest barrier reef in the world and many, many barrier islands to visit for scuba and snorkeling. It has the iconic Great Blue Hole, which is sort of a surreal giant underwater sinkhole that has to be seen to be believed. It's got lush rainforests, diverse wildlife, dramatic Mayan ruins, and the direct flights there are growing. This is one of the places that we're seeing new flights this year. There's a new nonstop from San Francisco, for example. And in terms of accessibility, English is its official language, unlike most other Central American countries. So that makes it even more accessible to the everyday traveler. Costa Rica is a place that has natural beauty and biodiversity, adventurous activities, zip lining and river rafting, surfing and skydiving and volcano hiking, plus chocolate and coffee farms. So there's an exotic kind of a feel to it too. And this year, Costa Rica has new direct flights from Boston and San Francisco and Seattle. And in Roatan, which is in the Bay Islands of Honduras, there are new daily direct flights from Atlanta and Denver, and increased service from Houston. So this is a scuba diver's dream, quite honestly, with the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef. The Bay Islands of Honduras are also known for having security statistics that are generally safer than the mainland. So these are great options when people are typically looking at warm weather, beach, island kinds of locations. When you're talking about places in Europe that are a little under the radar, they really aren't hidden gems so much as they're a little less crowded and less expensive than the big European capitals and the classic seaside cities. So you look at Portugal, for example, which we've mentioned. It's a real favorite of our travelers who go back over and over again for sort of the rolling valleys of vineyards. The wine regions there are really extraordinary. Miles and miles of gorgeous coastline, rich cultural and culinary traditions. And this year, United Airlines, as we mentioned, has new nonstop service both to Madeira Islands and to Faro, which is the capital of the Algarve region, with old cobblestone streets and beautiful beaches.
Yeah, and I would add to that, and thinking about value, one place that's on my list is the Caucasus, a great value there. Georgia has been up and coming for a while, and there are a lot of new kind of hipstery boutique hotels opening there. They're actually taking old Soviet factories and revamping them into hotels that, you know, very shiny and new, but with the bones of history behind them. And as I said, Georgia's been kind of the spot on the map in that region, but Armenia is coming into its own, and more travelers are headed just to Armenia or combining it with Georgia.
I also have to tell everybody how amazing Malta is, the Mediterranean island of Malta. I was there in October. It was my third trip, and it's under the radar. It is being discovered. I'm telling you right now, this is the year to go sooner rather than later, because every year it's going to probably grow and grow tourism there because of a number of things going on in the country. But that is reasonably priced, and it is it's go while it's still a secret. I wrote a big article about it that's on our homepage too.
And it just got dropped into the Q&A. Thank you, Christine. Okay, another question we got about the best place and time of year to see the Northern Lights. So we actually have an article precisely about this topic that I think will show up in the Q&A box shortly. The short answer, based on the feedback we've heard from travelers, is that Norway is the place where our travelers have had the most success seeing the Northern Lights. In terms of when, you need a dark sky to see them. So a lot of people write into us saying they want to go to Norway in August and go hiking and be outdoors and see the Northern Lights. And the problem is that it's very hard to see them when you have so many hours of daylight and so few of darkness. But late fall, winter, early spring is the season in the Northern Hemisphere to see the Northern Lights. There are there's the Aurora Australis down south. And another thing to keep in mind is that the solar activity, which causes the Northern Lights, is actually peaking in July of 2025. So that's why you may have heard about Northern Lights appearing across North America and far south, surprisingly south in the United States. And it's so actually in the coming 2025-26 winter will also be a great time. So you haven't missed your chance yet. The solar activity goes in, I think, 10-year cycles or so. So this is a prime time to get a great show. Wendy, we've got a question. How do your advisors balance travelers' desires to do some self-exploration with more programmed activities?
Yes, I think a lot of people, when they start to work with a travel specialist, a trip planning expert, they're so excited about all of the possibilities, and maybe they start to bite off more than they can chew. And of course, the travel expert will probably send a proposed itinerary with like every day jam-packed. All you need to do is say up front, I really want time on my own. Maybe you want to spend half of each day or every other day just exploring on your own. Just say up front what you and just remember that, like, I always try to do that whenever I'm traveling somewhere. I like to spend the last day. I don't want to schedule anything because I want to have the last day to just lose myself or enjoy, downtime before the long flight home, or go back and be more in depth with something that I really loved, like go back to that shop I found that I didn't get to spend time in. But you're good, works, make sure to work some downtime, keep some downtime in your itineraries. And when you want to spend time exploring on your own, just make that very clear to the travel advisor.
Great. And traveler Jean said, I'm looking for sunny, fun international locations with interesting culture and not overwhelmed with tourists. So my first answer to this question is Cuba. As you may know, US policy toward travel to Cuba has shifted back and forth over the years, and now with a new administration, it may change once again. If I could snap my fingers and take my family anywhere this winter or spring, I would take the opportunity while I still could to go to Cuba. It's not a beach destination by US rules of how you can travel there, but it's plenty sunny. And the number one feedback we get from travelers who've gone to Cuba is how fascinating it is to talk to the people there about their life and the culture there, meeting artists and musicians and such. Anyone else have ideas of sunny, fun international locations with interesting culture and not overwhelmed with tourists?
I was in one. In fact, I got over the holidays. In fact, I got this scarf there, Oman. It's Oman is a fascinating but really fun, very safe, beautiful, lots of beach. So I mean, it ticks all of those boxes, and the kids had a great time doing all kinds of fun, adrenaline pumping activities.
Now we got a lot of questions about Italy, so I thought we'd kind of do a lightning round. Wendy, are you ready? You were in Italy just last fall, so we got to go through some of these questions. Now the big news is that 2025 is the Jubilee year in Italy. One traveler asked, how will this affect travel in regions outside of Rome in terms of reservations, prices, guides?
So there are definitely places you can go outside of Rome, and I started talking about a few of them earlier. Regions and towns that are where you might see very few tourists because they're just off the beaten path. And in fact, there's a whole article, I just wrote about it. And again, if you go to the homepage, go to WendyPerrin.com, there's an article all about where to travel in Italy during the Jubilee year with a lot of ideas for you.
And how about outside of Rome? One person asked, is the Lake Garda area a good choice to visit this year?
Lake Garda can be less less in demand by international travelers than say Lake Como or Lake Lugano or Lake Maggiore. Another option is Lake Orta, which is, so Lake Garda is to the east of those other lakes, but Lake Orta is to the west. And that's also another gem.
One listener is visiting Florence in April to see her goddaughter who is studying there. She's thinking the trip will be 5 days, but is that a mistake?
Absolutely not. Oh my gosh. If I knew someone studying in Florence right now, I would jump on the plane. No, it's definitely enough time to have a great experience of Florence, one of my favorite cities.
And another iconic city. How about Venice? What are the best months to visit Venice? And do you have any recommendations for hotels? You were just there.
So my advice for hotels, well, first of all, okay, timing. You definitely want to, you do not want to go in the peak summer season. You want to go maybe October, November, March. Carnival is, of course, in like February, early March. It differs from year to year. you want to be careful of that time just because there'll be a lot of crowds in Venice. But I know so many people who've been to Venice in February, and they say that the fog, on the canals, and it lends this wonderful kind of mystical atmosphere. So I know people who have gone to Venice like basically every time of the year, and they always have a great time. Even when it's Aqua Alta, the high water, that's an experience they've never had before, and they find it to be a lot of fun. And in terms of hotels, I would just say try to choose a hotel not in the big tourist areas, but in a more residential area. Like when I was just there, I stayed in the Cannaregio area at the Venice Hotel, which was fabulous, and it was just all enough. It was an easy enough walk to everything, but it was still away from all those crowds, and you could just breathe. And in 1 minute, you could be on side streets with nobody on them at all.
Great. Susan, we've got some questions that are kind of up your alley from Randy, who asks, interesting destinations for a mobile 70-year-old, not a cruise, cultural, immersive type travel, off the beaten path and ungoogleable.
Ungoogleable, I think, is pretty tough, but our family took a kind of off the beaten track vacation last summer to the Azores, which is often done as a stopover from a Portugal trip. And we decided to put our whole vacation there and spent 10 days in the Azores. And I was very happy that we'd done that. It was kind of the opposite of Antarctica. There weren't things that I was just desperate to see, but every day was wonderful. There were glorious ferry rides from island to island, wonderful hikes among the volcanoes, interesting little communities built just along the shoreline where lava had flowed down. There was bicycle riding, whale watching, hiking, and we even cooked dinner one day, or someone actually cooked dinner for us one day in the volcano. So it was a very, very interesting place. And once we were out of the capital city, we really didn't see very many tourists at all.
True. Wendy, we got a question about cruises. With rising water levels worldwide, what is your opinion about booking a river cruise?
So it's not just rising water levels, it's also lowering so what happens is on European rivers, if the water gets too high or the water gets too low, they take everybody off the ship and put them on a bus. And basically you do the next several days or maybe even the rest of your trip on a bus. So I think you need to be aware of that before signing up for a river cruise, and also just be smart about which months are you going to choose, and what does the water look like that year, so that you're more likely to choose those times when you're not going to have either water that's too high or too low.
There are several questions in the category of best options for June and July, where to go to in South America in September, October, looking for a destination for a birthday in September. And so for that kind of, when you have a period of time when you can travel and you're not sure where you want to go, we have resources on our website to help with that. We have listed our favorite destinations by month in a series we call Where to Go When. You can find it in the black menu bar on the website under travel intel. So look for the month that you have when you got a window when you can travel, and we'll give you the places that are optimal, not because it's high season there. It may be low season and it's actually, shockingly great weather, but it's not a school break. So it's not when everyone else is trying to go, or it's, that shoulder season time that Wendy was talking about earlier. We got a couple of questions about Turkey. And Wendy, I know you've been many times to Turkey. People are asking, is it a good time to be planning a trip to Turkey? And another person asks, is it safe to travel to Turkey? What's your take on that?
Yes, I've been to Turkey 5 times. Honestly, I've never felt safer, including when Turkey is one of the places I went to shortly after 9/11. I was on assignment for Condé Nast Traveler, and I was checking it out as an American traveling in that part of the world. I have also been to far eastern Turkey, 15 miles from the Iraqi border, sleeping outdoors on the roof of a monastery there. So I mean, like, I've been all over. every part of Turkey. And I have to say, the people are so hospitable and welcoming and lovely. I feel very safe there. I think that, other people have been asking some questions about the safety, like how they should feel given the sort of changing political landscape nowadays and how they should feel about safety. I just want to say that, like, I've traveled in a lot of places where there were wars or coups. I've traveled in Syria, Lebanon, Uzbekistan, and a lot of places that people were like, why are you going there? And like, isn't that kind of dicey? Um, I just want to say that here's what I've always found about places like this, Turkey and other places that first of all, the fewer Americans there are where you're traveling, the more the local people they like you so much and the better treated you are because you're such a novelty. And it's like, it's a great time. It's a great experience to have. Like, this is what happened to us in Uzbekistan when there were a few tourists, there were like no other Americans, and people were so eager to talk to us and couldn't have been lovelier. And also another thing is that, when you travel, uh, this is what I've always found is that people don't judge you. I mean, governments come and go, they change, but most people in other countries, they don't like their government. Like, everybody complains about their government in whatever country they're in. And they also all realize that there's a big difference between governmental policies and individual people. Like, everywhere I go, you talk to the local people and you find out that you have so much more in common than there are differences. And nobody really takes into account. So I my experience has been that I certainly would not be worried about safety in Turkey.
Someone asked, is it too late to plan anything for the first week of April? And I would say no. And again, we have that series, Where to Go When. You can look there for optimal destinations. A few specific ideas. I've just been hearing that Norway has an unexpected availability. It is among our travelers' top countries for 2025, but people think of it for the summer hiking and outdoors activities or for the winter northern lights. They don't think of these shoulder seasons. I was in Norway in November, and I just loved being there in that spring, fall, shoulder season time of year. And you can do some hiking, you can do cross-country skiing in April. There's still snow in certain places. So that's one option for a last-minute trip. As I mentioned, there are the cherry blossoms in Korea, and it may still be possible to plan a trip to see those. They're often still blooming in the first half of April. And Wendy's also mentioned the Mediterranean being great in those times of the year. Sicily is a great option in April. There are a lot of nonstop flights, as Nicole mentioned, starting in May, so you can beat those travelers there. Nicole, we got a couple questions that I'd love to throw your way. One about family at Christmas travel, thinking about December 2025, looking for ideas for a family of 12.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So we get a good number of requests for these sort of ambitious, multi-generational trips, both for special occasions and for like big birthdays and holidays, things like that. And I think that's, in a way, we are the perfect place for someone to come for that, because it's very hard to juggle all the interests and the ages that are involved in the logistics of a trip like that, where you're pulling in lots of people, particularly for a special holiday or occasion. So the travel experts that we use on site in all these different countries are really good at listening to the age ranges and the activity desires that you want to be able to please and satisfy, and plugging you into both the locations and the kind of styles of lodging where you want to satisfy all your goals. For example, we did a feature on the dream trips of 2025, and I spoke to family members who are going to Italy later this year for a 50th anniversary trip for sort of the matriarch and the patriarch. And they are renting two villas close by, close to one another in Tuscany. Each villa has a private pool and a chef, and it comes with a Land Rover for driving around. And they fully intend for all the different, I think there's 22 people that are coming with grandchildren from 3 years old up to 23. And they're really looking for people to just kind of pursue their own desires. The grandfather in the family loves Pompeii, and he's really addicted to opera. Some people want to go into Rome and wander around. So these are the kind of planning trips that we hear about and that we publish a lot on the website. So if you go under the drop-down menus for things like Christmas and New Year's trips, Thanksgiving trips, multi-generational trips, graduation trips, you'll see a lot of options for ways that people have satisfied those kind of like special occasion itches.
Yeah, it can be really inspiring to hear what other people are doing for a big graduation or a special anniversary, things like that.
Yeah.
Someone asked, I'd like an estimate of the cost of using your travel assistance. So first of all, we don't charge anything for our advice. That part is free. The matchmaking, the people that we connect you with who actually will plan a trip for you, we have minimum pricing guidelines for each of them. If you go to their trip questionnaire, which you can find on the WOW list, there are guidelines there that give you kind of a ballpark estimate of what things will cost. And those figures are per day for 2 travelers typically, and usually include accommodations, your transportation within the country or region, and some private experiences that you have there. Let's see, we've got so many questions coming in. Try to get to as many of them as we can. We've gotten a lot of questions both tonight and before tonight about solo travel, particularly solo female travel. I feel like maybe we got to start doing some tours for solo female travelers. We got a whole group out there itching to travel. Susan, I know you've done a fair amount of solo travel at various points in your life.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that it can get you deeper under the skin of a place than traveling with other people, because you make friends more readily than when you have your own group. I remember I was in Israel, and I happened to be in a kibbutz there for Independence Day, and I met a couple who'd emigrated from London and were living in Israel, and they invited me to the weekly discussion at their house in Tel Aviv when I would be there later in my trip. What an amazing experience that was, and kind of surprising. By the same token, I traveled alone in South Africa right after apartheid lifted. It was quite a long time ago, and I met a woman on the Blue Train who lived in Johannesburg, and she invited me to stay at her house. I had gone on up to the game parks near Kruger and then back to Johannesburg, and it was amazing. We went to the Market Theater and saw a play, and I saw how someone genuinely lived in that place. So those are the kinds of things that I think opportunities that tend to come up for solo travelers. Now, of course, you also want to be comfortable, and sometimes that means having more guides than you might otherwise, or having a very carefully planned trip. But it's a kind of examining what will make you feel comfortable doing this. But I think there are great opportunities there.
Right. I want to try and we have more questions that we want to answer. We've got a bunch in the Q&A box. I'm going to try and get to some of those now. Ray asks, do you have someone who can help plan an overseas trip that would include 35-year-old parents of 2-year-old twins and grandparents? Who wants to talk about that kind of 3-generation travel?
There are so many possibilities for that. I mean, I really would recommend just write to questions@WendyPerrin.com, because it's a whole conversation, right? There are really so many possibilities that would be perfect for a group like that.
Yeah. We know people who are destination experts. The people on the WOW list typically are experts in a particular destination, and they work with a whole variety of travelers. They know what's going to work for a solo traveler. They know what's going to work for a multi-generational group and everything in between. So it's not so much about finding necessarily a multi-generational expert, but figuring out what the right destination is and then honing in on the person there.
I would love to just add that I think my most successful family trip that I've taken with all my kids was a trip that we went to Costa Rica, and we chose a villa as sort of our home base that had a pool in the backyard. And the backside of the house was glass walls that opened up to the pool right off the kitchen and the eating area. And the reason this was so valuable is when we had downtime between activities, or whoever didn't want to go off and do what we were doing, swimming became the focus for everyone of all ages. And so the interaction was great, because even my youngest and my oldest, who might not have spent a lot of time together otherwise, would actually play Marco Polo in the pool together, which was really kind of sweet to see. And so you want to think about the activities that are going to satisfy everyone in their activities that they choose and being able to get there, but also the downtime and the way you envision them spending time at the home base.
Definitely.
And also with 2-year-old twins, I think one of the things you really want to think about is how long are you willing to be on the plane? Like, how many hours of a flight are you looking for? That fact is going to determine what your best options are.
Yeah. Paul asks, we want to go to the Gargano Peninsula to visit my grandfather's hometown. Bowery has a light festival in early May. Do we need to drive to enjoy Puglia? And is it too late to plan a trip like this?
I don't think it's too late to plan a trip like that. Sounds great. I think that driving in Puglia, you could, there are many different ways to do it, but driving your own rental car is certainly one of them. And the idea of a light festival sounds, I mean, any kind of festival. I travel for festivals, so.
Robin asks, hi, Robin, has Croatia slowed down yet on tourism? What would you recommend a trip there? When would you recommend a trip there without major tourists? I know Croatia's a little bit tricky because it does really shut down. A lot of the infrastructure shuts down in the winter, so you can't go entirely in the off season.
I think it can be rainy from November through March, but that means that I would go toward the end of October or the start of April.
Kathy asks, where would you suggest travel to get out of the peak hot summers in Florida in July, August, and September? So I would point you back to that Where to Go When series that we have on the website that has some refreshing destinations at that time of year.
Coolcations are one of the trends, of course. But can I just say, I mean, getting out of the heat of New York City in August, one year we went to Newfoundland and it was so fabulous. It's not that far away. It's just right up there in Atlantic Canada. And there's New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, other parts of Eastern Canada as well. And also Western Canada that are fabulous in those hot summer months, August, July.
Bill asks, do you have specific recommendations on shoulder season travels to Northern Italy, Croatia, and Greece, as well as a fixer for the region? We have several actually. Or if you write to Ask Wendy, there are many specialists we know because those places are so popular, and they each have specific strengths and a focus. So we have a questionnaire that tries to pull out the details of the trip you have in mind so that we can connect you with the right person there. Any other specific recommendations for shoulder season travel?
In Mediterranean countries?
Northern Italy, Croatia, and Greece.
Yeah, again, I would just go in shoulder season, but also go to the under the radar spots where everybody else isn't. And it's so, I mean, if you're using the right travel specialist, they'll have dozens of suggestions like that for you. And of course, we also write about these places on the website. I really think, again, the easiest way to get these personalized recommendations is truly just go to WendyPerrin.com, go to where it says Ask Wendy in the black navigation menu bar. Just go to the black bar and click on Ask Wendy, fill out that. We'll give you all kinds of information and secret places to go, and who to talk to get the best experience of them.
So many questions, so little time. If we don't get to your question tonight, don't fret. Write to questions@WendyPerrin.com and we'll answer you there. Anyone seen? We have just a few minutes left. Anyone want to pull a question out that they're excited to talk about?
Well, maybe we can just go through a bunch of these just very quickly. Do we have time just to go, like just one sentence answers? But again, everybody can write to questions@WendyPerrin.com. But let's see. How can Amy find a reasonable trip to Antarctica? You guys did.
Well, I think it was the most expensive trip we ever take, but have ever taken, but worth it. It's so far away, and the logistics. The short answer is you're not going to get there cheaply, right? Because they're having to stock a whole ship to take you down to literally the end of the earth. But there are different levels of ships with different accommodations. So some are more affordable than others, and a expedition cruise specialist can help you figure that out.
Robin says she's headed to the North Pole this July. That's very exciting for sure. Sign me up. That's a trip I want to do. There are more questions about Rome and other off the beaten path places. And again, for that, I would go look at the article that's right on the homepage about travel in Italy this year. And it's got many off the beaten path ideas in it. When is shoulder season in non-Rome Italy? And I really think two very smart times for Italy are November and March. Those are definitely shoulder season. November, I know so many people who have had fabulous trips in November to like the Piedmont area, to both in northern and southern Italy. And March is even, I mean, people who have raved about Lake Como in March. So I really think those are like two times when a lot of people dismiss it when they shouldn't be.
Robin asked about behind the scenes tours of Notre Dame. I haven't heard of any yet, but I know exactly who I would ask to see what's happening. So if you write to us, write to Ask Wendy, we can investigate that for you. I'm sure it will happen at some point.
Yes. What about some of the very small countries such as Andorra, Liechtenstein, Luxembourg, Montenegro as some off the beaten path places to visit? Certainly, I've been to Andorra. It's interesting. It's, we went, my husband surprised me with a ski trip there one year. And the skiing was pretty good. It's in the Pyrenees between France and Spain. I wouldn't go for a long period of time, but it was interesting. Montenegro is absolutely gorgeous. It's right below Croatia, basically, especially the Kotor area. It's just spectacular looking and a lot of fun. So yes, those are some of the smaller under the radar places, but I haven't found one yet that beats Malta, I have to tell you. Go while it's still something of a secret.
Lisa asked, where in New Zealand and Australia do you recommend for a visit? Oh man, it's hard to narrow it down, but I would say start with just one country if you can. So many people try to do both. They think, it's a long plane ride. Will I ever get back there? And they end up trying to crunch both countries into less than 2 weeks. And you really often end up disappointed that you haven't done anything more than scratch the surface. So devote.
And the fact is, they think they're not going back, but they do. Anyone who goes to New Zealand and you think, oh, I better do both countries because I'm only going to be there once. People fall in love with it so much that they absolutely go back. If you can, do one trip for New Zealand, one trip for Australia. Believe me, you will still leave both countries saying, oh my gosh, there's way too much we didn't get to do. They are really magnificent.
That said, we have a trip coming up on our Dream Trips profile of things that are coming up this year. Two sisters have it on their bucket list, and they have for years. They are doing a month-long, I think it's actually going to be a total of 6 weeks, and they're going through Australia, New Zealand, and they decided after all this that a cruise home rather than flying home with 2 business trip tickets was the way to go. And if you go to the Dream Trips feature, you can read about what they're doing. And I hope to follow up on them later after the trip to interview them about how that went and what they recommended.
Okay, well, so we've gone over time. I see that there are a few questions left, but actually these are all questions we could, if you all will write to questions@WendyPerrin.com, I promise we will be happy to send you back some ideas and our best advice. And so I just want to thank everyone for joining us and let you know that this Zoom recording and links to all the articles we mentioned, will be including all of that in our Sunday newsletter. So if you don't already receive the newsletter, be sure to sign up for it. If you go to WendyPerrin.com and you look on the top right, it'll say, see our latest newsletter. Just click on that and that will take you to the place where you can sign up for it. And we look forward to hearing your questions over at questions@WendyPerrin.com. Again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. And thank you so much to my fellow panelists here, Brooke Wilkinson, Nicole Bernier, and Susan Crandall. Thank you, everybody, so much. We'll be letting you know in the newsletter about our future travel talks and Zooms. Again, we'll be scheduling them when there's intel we know that you need to know. We're living in a fast changing world, and we'll be there to give you the answers you're looking for. So again, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Have a good
Happy
evening. Happy
travels.
travels.